What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense actors sits down with daytime television's most opinionated panel? Well, let's just say it doesn't end with polite applause and scheduled commercial breaks. Today, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had Tom Hardy storming off the View set, leaving Joy Behar speechless and the other co-hosts scrambling to salvage what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. This is a story about creative integrity, media manipulation, and what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this story gets wilder with every minute. The tension was palpable from the moment Tom Hardy walked onto the View stage. Fresh off promoting his latest gritty crime thriller, the British actor carried himself with that familiar intensity that had made him a household name. His publicist had arranged this appearance as part of the standard promotional circuit, but what nobody anticipated was how quickly things would spiral out of control. Whoopi Goldberg, serving as moderator that day, opened with her usual warm welcome. "We're thrilled to have Tom Hardy here with us today. Tom, you've been making some incredible films lately, and your latest project looks absolutely fascinating." Hardy nodded politely, his eyes scanning the panel. Sitting beside Whoopi were Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, Sunny Hostin, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, each armed with their own set of prepared questions and personal agendas. "Thanks for having me," Hardy replied in his distinctive gravelly voice. "Always interesting to be here in New York." Joy Behar immediately jumped in, her voice cutting through the pleasantries. "Tom, I have to ask about your choice of roles. It seems like you're always playing these dark, violent characters. Don't you think Hollywood has a responsibility to promote more positive messages, especially in today's climate?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Hardy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his response remained measured. "I think storytelling has always been about exploring the full spectrum of human experience, joy, the darkness, and the light. That's what makes art meaningful. But surely you can see how glorifying violence affects society." Behar pressed, her tone becoming more confrontational. "These characters you play, they're not exactly role models for young people." Sarah Haynes tried to intervene diplomatically. "I think what Joy is getting at is whether actors have a responsibility to consider the impact of their work." Hardy turned to Sarah, appreciating the more thoughtful approach. "Absolutely, Sarah. But I'd argue that my responsibility is to tell authentic stories, not to sanitize reality. When I played Bronson, I wasn't glorifying prison violence. I was showing the psychological complexity of a real person." Sunny Hostin leaned forward, her legal background evident in her precise questioning. "Tom, that's an interesting point about authenticity. But how do you balance that with the commercial aspects of filmmaking? These studios are making money off violence." "That's a fair question, Sunny," Hardy replied, showing genuine respect for her approach. "The commercial side exists, but that doesn't negate the artistic intent. Look at films like The Revenant or Mad Max. Yes, there's action and violence, but they're fundamentally about survival, about what it means to be human under extreme circumstances." Alyssa Farah Griffin nodded thoughtfully. "I can see that perspective. It's about the context and the story being told, not just the surface elements." But Joy Behar wasn't satisfied with the diplomatic turn the conversation was taking. "Oh, come on," she interjected, her voice rising slightly. "You can dress it up with all the artistic language you want, but at the end of the day, you're making millions off movies where people get beaten up and killed. How is that different from what we criticize in other forms of media?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the light, promotional interview they'd expected to witness. Hardy's posture straightened, and for the first time, a flash of genuine irritation crossed his features. "Joy, with respect, I think you're oversimplifying both my work and the nature of storytelling itself," Hardy said, his voice remaining calm but gaining an edge. "When Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, was he glorifying murder because people died in the play? When Scorsese made Goodfellas, was he promoting organized crime? Those are completely different." Behar shot back. "Shakespeare was high art. What you're doing is commercial entertainment designed to make money off violence." The dismissive tone in her voice was unmistakable, and it struck a nerve. Hardy's eyes narrowed slightly, and the other panelists could sense the shift in energy. Whoopi tried to redirect. "Let's talk about your process as an actor, Tom. How do you prepare for these intense roles? But Hardy was no longer in promotional mode. Joy's comment about his work not being high art had clearly landed wrong. You know, Whoopi, I'd love to discuss the craft, but I'm a bit stuck on Joy's assessment of my work as somehow less legitimate than other forms of storytelling. I didn't say it was illegitimate, Behar replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm just questioning whether it's responsible. Responsible to whom? Hardy asked, his voice gaining intensity. To you? To some arbitrary standard of what entertainment should be? Who appointed you the arbiter of artistic merit? The studio fell silent. This was escalating beyond the usual spirited debate The View was known for. Sarah Haynes looked uncomfortable, while Sunny Hostin watched with the focused attention of someone witnessing a legal cross-examination. Joy Behar's face flushed slightly. I'm just asking questions that I think our viewers want answered. This is a talk show, not a fan club meeting. And I'm giving you honest answers, Hardy replied. But there's a difference between asking questions and being dismissive of an entire body of work because it doesn't fit your personal preferences. Alyssa tried to de-escalate. I think we're all just trying to understand the broader implications of entertainment choices in today's world. Hardy turned to her with a nod. Alyssa, I appreciate that, and it's a conversation worth having. But there's a way to have that conversation without condescension. The word condescension hung in the air, clearly directed at Joy Behar, who bristled visibly. Condescension? I'm asking legitimate questions about the content you're putting out there. No, Joy, you're not just asking questions, Hardy said, his composure beginning to crack. You started this interview by essentially telling me that my work is harmful and irresponsible. You dismissed my explanations about artistic integrity and storytelling. You compared my work unfavorably to Shakespeare as if commercial success somehow invalidates artistic merit. That's not questioning, that's judging. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Camera operators adjusted their angles, sensing they were capturing something significantly more dramatic than the typical celebrity interview. Whoopi made another attempt to regain control. Tom, I think what we're all trying to navigate here is the complex relationship between art and social responsibility. But Joy Behar wasn't backing down. Exactly, Whoopi. And I think it's perfectly fair to question whether someone who makes millions portraying criminals and violent characters has really thought through the impact of that work. That was the breaking point. Hardy's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. You know what, Joy? Let me ask you something. What exactly is your contribution to society? You sit behind this desk every day, gossiping about celebrities, making snide comments about people's personal lives, and passing judgment on work you clearly don't understand. How is that more socially responsible than the films I make? The studio audience gasped audibly. This had gone from uncomfortable to explosive in a matter of seconds. Joy Behar's face went through several shades of red as Hardy's words sank in. The other panelists exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or let this train wreck continue. The studio audience was completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. Excuse me. Behar's voice was dangerously low. Are you seriously going to sit there and attack what I do for a living? I'm not attacking anything, Hardy replied, his voice steady but his eyes blazing. I'm pointing out the hypocrisy. You want to lecture me about social responsibility while your entire career is built on commentary and criticism. At least my characters serve a narrative purpose. What purpose does your daily judgment of other people serve? Sunny Hostin tried to jump in. Tom, I think we're getting a bit off track here. This doesn't need to become personal. It became personal the moment Joy decided my work wasn't worthy of respect. Hardy shot back, not taking his eyes off Behar. I came here to talk about a film that took 3 years of my life, that explores themes of redemption and human resilience. Instead, I get lectured about being irresponsible by someone whose idea of discourse is interrupting guests and making sarcastic comments. Whoopi's voice carried the authority of years in entertainment. Tom, let's all take a breath here. This is getting heated. No, Whoopi, let him continue. Joy interjected, her voice dripping with disdain. I want to hear more about how terrible I am at my job from someone who pretends to be other people for a living. The condescension in her tone was unmistakable, and it hit Hardy like a slap across the face. Sarah Haynes visibly winced at Joy's choice of words. Pretends to be other people? Hardy repeated slowly, his voice deadly quiet. Is that really how you see what I do? What actors do? Well, what would you call it? Behar replied with a smirk. You memorize lines someone else wrote. You put on costumes. You play pretend. It's not exactly rocket science. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Behar seemed to realize she'd crossed a line, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked mortified, while Sunny Hostin shook her head slightly. Hardy stood up slowly from his chair, and the movement sent a ripple of tension through the entire studio. You know what, Joy? I've worked with some incredible people in this industry. Directors who've dedicated their lives to storytelling. Writers who pour their souls into scripts. Cinematographers who create visual poetry. Actors who transform themselves completely to serve a story. His voice was building now, controlled but passionate. I've worked with veterans dealing with PTSD who found solace in the stories we told. I've met kids who were inspired to overcome their own struggles because they saw characters who never gave up. I've been part of films that raised awareness about mental health, about social justice, about human dignity. Joy Behar shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but her expression remained defiant. That's all very touching, but it doesn't change the fact that most of your movies are violent entertainment. And your show is what exactly? Hardy fired back. Enlightened discourse? You spend every episode gossiping about celebrities' personal lives, making jokes about politicians' appearances, and reducing complex social issues to sound bites. At least my violence serves a narrative purpose. Your cruelty is just for ratings. The word cruelty hit the panel like a physical blow. Sarah Haynes looked genuinely upset, while Whoopi's expression grew increasingly stern. Now wait just a minute. Behar stood up as well, her voice rising. I've been doing this job for decades. I've interviewed world leaders, I've covered important stories, I've given voice to issues that matter. Have you? Hardy challenged. Or have you just been giving your opinion about everything while contributing nothing constructive? When was the last time you actually changed someone's mind about something important instead of just preaching to people who already agree with you? Alyssa tried desperately to intervene. I think we're all passionate about our work, and maybe we should focus on that common ground. But Hardy was beyond diplomatic solutions now. You want to know what's irresponsible, Joy? It's sitting in this privileged position, with this platform, and using it to tear people down instead of building anything up. It's making careers out of cynicism and calling it journalism. I am a journalist, Behar snapped. I've been in this business longer than you've been acting. Being in the business and being good at it are two different things, Hardy replied coldly. Longevity doesn't equal legitimacy. The studio audience was completely captivated now. This had gone far beyond entertainment into something raw and real. Cameras captured every expression, every gesture, every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. Sunny Hostin made another attempt at mediation. Look, I think we all respect each other's professions here. Maybe we can find a way to have this conversation without attacking each other personally. Hardy turned to Sunny with genuine respect in his voice. Sunny, I appreciate that, and you're right. But respect has to be mutual. I didn't come here to attack anyone. I came here to talk about my work, and I was immediately put on the defensive by someone who clearly had no interest in understanding that work. Understanding. Joy laughed bitterly. What's to understand? You punch people on screen and get paid millions for it. It's not exactly Hamlet. There it was again, the dismissive attitude that had started this whole confrontation. Hardy's face darkened. You know what? You're right. It's not Hamlet. Because Hamlet was written by one person, performed by one person, directed by one person. What I do involves hundreds of people working together to create something. Stunt coordinators who choreograph action sequences like dance. Sound designers who create entire worlds through audio. Makeup artists who spend hours transforming actors into characters. His voice was getting stronger, more passionate. Every film I make employs dozens of craftspeople, artists, technicians. People who support their families through this work. People who take pride in their contributions to storytelling. And you sit there and dismiss all of that as playing pretend, like we're children in a sandbox. Whoopi finally stepped in with authority. All right, everyone needs to calm down. This is getting out of hand. But Joy Behar wasn't finished. Oh, so now I'm supposed to feel sorry for millionaire actors and their crews? Give me a break. You make More money in one film than most people see in a lifetime, and you want sympathy. It's not about sympathy, Hardy replied, his patience finally exhausted. It's about basic respect for the work and the people who do it. But clearly, that's something you're incapable of. Incapable. Behar's voice reached a new pitch. You arrogant British snob. You come on my show and insult me, insult my work, insult my intelligence, and then lecture me about respect. The personal attacks were flying now, and the other panelists looked increasingly desperate to regain control. Sarah Haynes actually put her head in her hands. While Alyssa stared at the table in mortification, Hardy's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Your show? Joy, this isn't your show. This is The View. You're one voice among many, though you seem to forget that most of the time. And as for being a snob, at least I don't pretend my opinions are more valuable than everyone else's just because I have a microphone. How dare you? Behar hissed. I've earned my place here. I've worked for everything I have. And so have I. Hardy shot back. The difference is I don't use my platform to tear other people down for sport. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. What started as a routine promotional interview had devolved into the most explosive confrontation in The View's history. Both Hardy and Behar were standing now, facing each other across the table like gladiators in an arena. Whoopi Goldberg's voice cut through the hostility with the authority of someone who'd seen it all. All right, that's enough. Both of you need to sit down and take a breath. But Joy Behar was beyond backing down. No, Whoopi. I'm not going to sit here and be insulted by some actor who thinks he's better than everyone else. Tom, you want to talk about platforms? You use yours to glorify violence and then have the nerve to lecture me about responsibility. Hardy's laugh was bitter and sharp. Glorify violence. Joy, you've clearly never actually watched any of my films. You've made up your mind based on what? Movie posters? Trailers? You're criticizing work you haven't even bothered to understand. I don't need to watch every violent movie to know what they're selling. Behar fired back. Blood, guns, and testosterone. That's your brand, isn't it? Sarah Haynes finally found her voice, desperation evident in her tone. Can we please just take a step back here? This is getting way too personal. Hardy turned to Sarah, his voice softening slightly. Sarah, I appreciate that you want to keep things civil, but this stopped being about civility when Joy decided to attack not just my work, but my character and intelligence. Sonny Hostin nodded grimly. Tom's right. This conversation has definitely crossed some lines. Behar whirled on Sonny. Oh, so now you're taking his side? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Hollywood comes in here with their charm and their accents, and suddenly everyone forgets to ask the hard questions. Hard questions? Hardy's voice rose incredulously. Joy, you haven't asked a single hard question. You've made accusations, you've been dismissive, you've been condescending, but you haven't asked anything that resembles journalism. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried one more time to salvage the situation. Look, I think we're all passionate about our work, and maybe that passion is getting the better of us here. Passion? Behar scoffed. This isn't passion, this is arrogance. Pure and simple. He can't handle being challenged, so he attacks me personally. Hardy's composure finally shattered completely. Challenged? Joy, you want to know what a real challenge looks like? Try spending 6 months learning to fight like a prisoner for Bronson. Try gaining 40 pounds of muscle and then losing it again for a role. Try working 18-hour days in brutal conditions to tell a story that means something to people. His voice was building to a crescendo now. Try collaborating with directors, writers, and other actors to create something that didn't exist before. Try taking risks with your career to work on projects that matter instead of taking the safe path every single time. Oh, please, Behar rolled her eyes. You're not curing cancer, you're making movies. And you're not changing the world. You're hosting a talk show, Hardy shot back. But at least I don't pretend my work is more important than everyone else's. Whoopi stood up, her voice carrying final authority. Okay, that's it. We're going to commercial. But the damage was already done. Hardy shook his head, his disgust evident. You know what, Whoopi? Don't bother. I'm done here. He started to remove his microphone, but Joy Behar wasn't finished. Oh, what a surprise. The tough guy can't handle a little criticism, so he's running away. Hardy froze, his hand on the microphone clip. Slowly, he turned back to face Behar, and the look in his eyes made several people in the studio take a step back. Running away? His voice was dangerously quiet. Joy, I've been in this industry for over 2 decades. I've been criticized by people who actually know what they're talking about. I've been reviewed by professional critics who understand storytelling. I've been challenged by directors who push me to be better. He took a step closer to the panel. But I've never, in all that time, encountered someone so thoroughly committed to ignorance as you are right now. You don't want to have a conversation. You want to have a monologue. You don't want to learn anything. You want to prove you're right. You don't want to engage with ideas. You want to tear them down. The studio was dead silent. Every camera was focused on Hardy as he continued his devastating assessment. You talk about social responsibility, but what's socially responsible about your approach to discourse? You interrupt, you dismiss, you attack. You turn every conversation into a fight and then act surprised when people fight back. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Sunny Hostin was shaking her head sadly. Alyssa Farah. Griffin stared at the table, clearly wishing she was anywhere else. Behar's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. You don't know anything about me or what I've accomplished. I know enough, Hardy replied coldly. I know that you've had every opportunity today to have a meaningful conversation about art, about storytelling, about the responsibility of entertainers in society. Instead, you chose to be petty, dismissive, and insulting. He finished removing his microphone and placed it on the table. You want to know what's really irresponsible? It's wasting a platform like this. It's having the opportunity to engage with different perspectives and choosing instead to grandstand and attack. Whoopi made one last attempt. Tom, please. Let's just take a break and reset. Hardy looked at Whoopi with genuine respect. Whoopi, I have nothing but admiration for you and what you've accomplished. This isn't about you or the show. This is about someone who's more interested in being right than being fair. He turned back to Joy Behar for his final words. Joy, I hope someday you realize that your role here gives you the power to elevate conversations, not destroy them. You could use your platform to bring out the best in your guests, to explore ideas, to actually inform your audience about things that matter. His voice carried a note of sadness now. Instead, you've chosen to use it to tear people down. That's not journalism. That's not entertainment. That's just cruel. And frankly, your audience deserves better. With that, Hardy turned and walked toward the exit. The studio remained frozen in shocked silence as the sound of his footsteps echoed through the space. Behar finally found her voice, but it came out as a weak protest. This is ridiculous. He's being completely unreasonable. But even as she spoke, it was clear that the fight had gone out of her. The other panelists remained silent, processing what they'd just witnessed. Sarah Haynes was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. That was intense. Sunny Hostin nodded slowly. I've never seen anything like that in all my years in television. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked shaken. I feel like we all need to learn something from this. Whoopi sat back down heavily, her expression thoughtful. Well, that certainly wasn't what anyone expected when they tuned in today. Joy Behar remained standing, her face a mixture of anger and something that might have been shame. He had no right to speak to me that way. But the silence that followed her words spoke volumes. Even she seemed to realize that whatever had just happened, it was more than just a disagreement between a host and a guest. As the cameras finally stopped rolling, the studio remained in stunned silence. What had started as a simple promotional interview had become something much more significant, a moment that would be dissected and discussed for years to come. The confrontation between Tom Hardy and Joy Behar had exposed something deeper about the nature of discourse, respect, and responsibility in entertainment. It had shown what happens when two strong personalities clash over fundamental questions about art, criticism, and human dignity. And now, as the dust settled and the participants tried to process what had just occurred, one thing was clear. This was a moment that would define how both the guest and the host would be remembered, not just by the studio audience, but by everyone who witnessed this unprecedented breakdown of civility on daytime television. So what do you think? Was Tom Hardy justified in his response to Joy Behar's questions, or did he cross the line with his personal attacks? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. The world of celebrity interviews is full of surprising moments, and we'll be here to break them all down for you.